So today we're going to be talking about the Eleatic Monists. Still in the pre-Socratics. We haven't gotten to Socrates yet. We have at least one more session of pre-Socratics, hopefully exactly one more session of pre-Socratics. We'll talk about the pluralists and the sophists at our next meeting on Tuesday. But today, Eleatic Monism. This is yet another form of monism. We've seen that term monism before, right? What does it mean? One what?
Fundamental substance.
Yeah, one fundamental substance, right? It's especially if we're talking about like a substance monism, right? We're talking about like one fundamental substance, that everything is really that one thing. The Eleatic Monists are taking a very, let's go ahead and say, idiosyncratic approach to monism. We've seen in fact, most of the folks, and I've mentioned before that like a lot of folks will look at pre-Socratic philosophy in general as like a series of different stabs at monism. I'm not sure if that's always accurate, but if we're going to think about all the pre-Socratic philosophers in this Cliff's Notes fashion of like everybody's taking a different take on like everything is blah, 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 blah. Like a kind of, I don't know, like a dorm room poster of pre-Socratic philosophy where Thales says everything is water, right. And Anaximander says everything is the apeiron. And Anaximenes says everything is air. You try to control your excitement here. And then the Pythagoreans say everything is mathematical ratio, right? And then Xenophanes, does Xenophanes say everything is? Kinda, sort of, but like, yeah, what does Xenophanes say? Everything is, well, I don't know if he says everything is oneness. These guys are definitely going to say, like, everything is a kind of a oneness or a unity. Xenophanes says, Shai? Yeah, I don't know if he's saying everything is that one unchanging, incomprehensible God, but there's the unity, right? If there's it's maybe not difficult to think of Xenophanes as some sort of a monist, because he has kind of a unified idea of God. Instead of a polytheist, he's a monotheist, and there's our monism. It's a theological sort of monism. And then what was the last one? Heraclitus. Everything is fire, or everything is fire is a cipher there for change. Everything is flux, right? Everything is in ever-living fire. Now, not all of those were like so simple as to say like, oh, that's clearly a form of monism. For example, the Pythagoreans say everything is mathematical ratio, but like, is that like like that's not unity, right? With unity you get one sort of mathematical ratio, the ratio of like 1 to 1, or any other sort of articulation of 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, that sort of unity. But there are all kinds of numbers, right? In fact, number seems to like be picking out plurality. That's kind of one of the things that it does. So for the Pythagoreans, even though we might say everything is mathematical ratio, and in that sense we can think of them as kind of sort of a monistic sort of approach, it certainly seems to be a lot more complicated than that. We dropped in this other big complication with Heraclitus at our last meeting, where we noted that if everything is constantly in a state of change, unity starts to just kind of like crumble away, even though we might point out fragments where Heraclitus says it's wise to agree that all is one. I think Emily pointed that one out for us. Heraclitus does say it's wise to agree that all is one, but he also says you can never step into the same river twice. Well, if everything is one, then of course it's like, how can you not step into the same river twice? The river's always going to be one thing, right? But when we started looking at this concept of change, we started to discover this idea of like, well, change involves a sort of a destruction and creation process, right? Destroy what was before and create something new. That's how change occurs. And if that's happening, then, ooh, man, when everything is in a constant state of change, when nothing stands still, it's hard to get unity even like of myself over time, of the river over time, of anything over time. It's constantly changing from like one thing to another thing, always being a different thing. And therefore, instead of a unity, maybe we get this kind of like indefinite plurality. That's certainly one way of reading Heraclitus. I'm going to remind us of that when we read a Platonic dialogue where Socrates is talking to Parmenides, who we're going to learn about Parmenides today. And I'm going to suggest that there's the ghost in that conversation. We never get like Heraclitus coming and talking. We never get anybody representing this Heraclitean idea of indefinite plurality, but it's there in the conversation. It's kind of as a, I don't know, a specter. Yeah, Andrew.
I was discussing this with someone the other day, and I'm not sure that I exactly fully would support the position, but when Heraclitus did say that, it's wise to agree that all is one, isn't exactly saying all is one.
He's saying it's wise to agree.
Correct.
Which might not be the truth.
Correct.
I mean, would it surprise us if Heraclitus says, like, out of one side of his mouth all is one, and then out of the other side of his mouth, like, all is an indefinite plurality? That seems like, that sounds like Heraclitus, yeah, to say, like, two completely contradictory things. After all, he's really big on this idea of, like, opposition and strife, right? That this is also a big part of the Heraclitean picture, insofar as we can try to make sense of a Heraclitean picture at all. There's a real chaos there. There's something interesting going on with the Eleatic Monists in terms of like the style of monism that they're working with. There's also something interesting going on with the Eleatic Monists, specifically with Parmenides, although I think it's there for Zeno as well. And maybe this is like a philological point. Maybe this just has to do with the fact that we have different sorts of texts available from the Eleatic Monists than we do everybody else. From everybody else, we have little tiny fragments and second and third hand sayings from different folks. We kind of have to try to piece together a coherent sort of a viewpoint for those philosophers, if we want to call them philosophers, indeed. We have to kind of piece that together on our own. With Parmenides and with Zeno, we get full-blown arguments from them. So earlier I had, very early, like right at the beginning of the course, I was talking about how the beginning of philosophy is usually described as this movement from mythos to logos. And we've been wondering, like, where is the logos? Where are the arguments? I also mentioned that that philosophy as a discipline uses a methodology of rational argument. And we've been getting little pithy sayings, right? We've been getting, like Heraclitus gives us these little sayings that are weird little puzzles, and you have to pick them up and kind of play with them and try to figure out, like, what does that mean? And try to read that against some of the other stuff that he says. Or Thales says everything's water, and we have to like try to figure out, like, why would he think that everything is water? We have to supply the arguments and the reasons on our own. Not so with these guys. So I'm not sure where philosophy starts. I'm not sure like where in this process of that we've been talking about. Like we say, oh, we definitely crossed a line here. This was the moment where like Greeks started doing philosophy. So maybe it was Thales, maybe it was Anaximander, maybe it was the Pythagoreans, maybe it was Heraclitus. Who knows where that happened? But by the time we get to the pre-Socratics, it's definitely happened. We get something that looks an awful lot like philosophy as it exists today, in the sense of kind of an extended sort of an argument where we get premises that are given to us that are proposed as plausible, and we get like some of the most plausible premises that you could possibly ask for from Parmenides. And then from those premises, we get an argument that takes us step by step from the things that seemed obvious at the beginning to some conclusion that maybe is a little bit surprising. So we're going to be looking at these two figures today, Parmenides and Zeno. Let's start with Parmenides. I'm not going to put Zeno on the board just yet because I'm not sure if I'm going to have room. Might have to do some erasing and coming back. We call them the Eleatic Monists because they're from Elea. Yeah, Elea. Kind of far away from everything that we had seen before. We had noted, who was here? Croton, yeah. Croton, that's the city, and the Pythagoreans were here. In Croton. And then Miletus was over here. That was our Milesians. I don't remember if I actually mentioned Xenophanes and... I mentioned Xenophanes and Heraclitus, but I don't know if I said where they were from. Xenophanes from up here in Colophon. And then Heraclitus down here in Ephesus. You can still go visit Ephesus today. There are ruins there. You can still go visit Elea today. There are ruins there as well. So a cluster of Ionian philosophers over here, and then these like weirdos off in Italy doing their thing. It's not Italy yet. It won't be Italy for a very, very long time. Pythagoreans, Nya, and Elea, Nya, and Parmenides of Elea. Parmenides was, like many of these philosophers or proto-philosophers or pre-Socratic philosophers before him, Parmenides was like, he was just a local wise guy. He was like a shaman. And there's plenty of good evidence to suggest that Parmenides, and in fact a lot of these pre-Socratic philosophers, was really taken with Orphic mythology, this kind of like story of Orpheus. Are you guys familiar enough with your Greek mythology to remember Orpheus? No. Who does know? What's the deal with Orpheus? Yeah, Dan.
He's a really good singer, son of
He's
Apollo, goes
yeah.
down to Hades, convinces Hades.
Goes down to Hades. That's not like something that like your average person manages to do. Not only does he go to Hades, but
he talks Hades into letting
his lady, Eurydice.
Eurydice back with him.
Yeah,
back
so Orpheus is in love with Eurydice. She dies and goes to the underworld, or she's taken to the underworld. And Orpheus is like, no, I'm going to go get her back. And he's such a good musician that he can kind of like convince people with his music and his singing. Manages to convince Hades to let him take Eurydice out. Kind of like Lot and Lot's wife. Doesn't go according to plan. He looks back. He's told not to look back, and he looks back before he's out. And like, Eurydice doesn't make it. But Orpheus makes it out. Orpheus goes to the underworld. Orpheus goes to like the land of the dead. And then comes back, which is kind of something. And it's maybe easy to see where philosophers would be taken with this sort of an idea too. Somebody who goes beyond to the place where like the dead people are and then comes back. And if somebody goes to like where the dead people are and then comes back, I don't know about you, like I want to hear their story. I mean, like, what was that like? There's probably some sort of insight that's to be gained from this sort of thing. Parmenides, like many of the others who were kind of like taken with these Orphic myths, thought that some sort of insight was to be gained from this. And in fact, that like maybe like the Pythagoreans were suggesting that the body, which is not like where you really are, your soul, your kind of like immaterial soul, that's who you really are. And that's going to live on after you die. That's the thing that's going to go to the afterworld. And when that comes back, oh yeah, that's interesting. That's going to be like where the greatest insights are made. With the soul when it's unencumbered by the body. We're going to see this from Plato as well. But Parmenides certainly seems to be working with this idea too. And as legend has it, he would like go off into a cave and just kind of lie there motionless for days. He wouldn't eat, like far away from everybody else, in the dark, as if to kind of like turn your body off, right? To lie motionless in the dark, far away where you can't hear any sounds, as if to try to separate your soul from your body. And he would have insights, and then he would come back down from the mountains to the village and say, like, all right, here's what I figured out. People would ask, he was like a shaman. People would ask him questions, and he would try to like figure out, like, all right, here's the wise thing to do. He was the local wise guy, wise man. And kind of had this kind of Orphic approach to how it was that he kind of tapped into that wisdom. Now, I don't know about you, that doesn't sound anything like philosophy to me. That sounds like, I don't know what that sounds like. What's that?
He's meditating.
He's meditating. Yeah, perhaps he's meditating in a very specific sort of way. Yeah, he's meditating. But just kind of waiting for inspiration. And then once you get that kind of lightning bolt of inspiration, being like, I've had the idea. I don't know if that's really philosophy either, to come down and say, like, here's what I found. I don't know, maybe we want an explanation or something like that. Yeah. A little bit, yeah, more like a prophet than a philosopher, right? Who gets divine revelation from a cave, from the cosmos, from the music of the spheres, perhaps, from God, from the gods. And this is exactly what we get in Parmenides offers us a poem. This is what we have surviving with Parmenides. We have this poem, Periphuseos, which pretty much decent translation for that would be On Nature. Periphuseos. And in On Nature, well, what happens? There's 3 parts to this poem. We have this kind of, what's usually referred to as the proem. It's like a preamble to the poem. And then we get another section, and then another section. Start me with the preamble. What's going on in this poem, Periphuseos, from Parmenides? You read it. You even took a reading quiz on it. How does it start?
He is taken by the gods.
He gets taken, away to have a conversation with the goddess. Yeah, there are young maidens who the mares take him. Mares, the horses, these horses, and young women take him in a chariot. Where do they take him? Yeah. Oh.
Doesn't he get born from the horses?
Is he what?
He is born from the horses.
Not born like natality.
Okay.
Born like carried. Yeah.
Okay.
He's that kind of. They bear him. Not he's not born from the horses. Yeah, that was you wanna get that one straight. Yeah, the horses bear him forth. They carry him on the chariot, and where do they carry him? Yeah, not to the gates of night and day. Well, to the gates of night and day, and then through them, beyond the gates of night and day. Somebody's at the gates of night and day too, guarding the gates of night and day. Did we catch who that is? Justice. Justice is guarding the gates of night and day. And the young maidens sweet talk Justice and say, let him through. Does that sound familiar? Gates of night and day guarded by Justice? Have we heard that before someplace? Something like Justice determined. Before we get to that, what's beyond the gates of night and day? What's going on when somebody is carried beyond the gates of night and day and then they have a conversation with the goddess? Yeah, immortality, or he's dying, maybe? Or, he's taken, beyond the gates of night and day, beyond these kind of, simple dualities of night and day where there are things, and beyond that, and that's guarded by Justice. We saw this a little bit with Anaximander, this idea that, Justice has to do with the coming and going between, from out of the apeiron and then going back into the apeiron, right? And this is creation and destruction as well. When something becomes a thing, it is created. It comes out of the indefinite and becomes some definite thing. And when it's destroyed, it goes back into the definite. And Anaximander says this is what justice demands. And here we have Parmenides giving a similar sort of a story where there are gates of night and day. He's being taken. I've kind of mentioned that Parmenides is part of this sort of Orphic tradition. So it's not kind of an outlandish. In fact, it seems like an incredibly plausible interpretation of what it is that Parmenides is talking about in this poem, of as he's being taken to the underworld, right? He's being taken beyond the world of the living into something past that, something outside of simple dualities like night and day. So in the poem, he's taken beyond the gates of night and day. And he meets the goddess, and the goddess says, don't freak out. No ill fate has brought you here. You're not actually dead. We've just kind of brought you to the underworld, or we brought you to this kind of place that's beyond the world of the living. And I'm going to send you back. And I'm going to send you back with an account, with a tale, to tell everybody else. I just mentioned that, I thought Parmenides was this is definitely philosophy by the time we get to philosophy. Well, by the time we get to Parmenides, this doesn't sound like philosophy at all. We've got divine revelation. We've got I died and I came back and here's what I saw. He's talking to a goddess. This sounds more prophetic, right? But what the goddess tells him is pretty interesting, and it's an argument. The goddess gives him an argument. The goddess gives him a logos, an account, that, as I mentioned before, begins with premises and moves on to some certain conclusion. The goddess says, I'm going to give you two different stories here. I'm going to talk about two paths. There's this path of unerring truth. There's the path of truth. The Greek word for this is aletheia. Aletheia is an interesting word there. Literally, you might notice, we've got that, alpha privative at the beginning again. Yeah. It's, does anybody know what lethe is all about? This is also kind of dark underworld Greek mythology stuff. The river Lethe is a river in the underworld that once you cross it, if you kind of touch it, it makes you forget everything. This is maybe important if you're going to have people going back and forth like into the underworld and then like out of the underworld. You don't want people telling the secrets of what's going on in the underworld. If we're talking about Pythagoreans and they're saying like souls are reincarnated, somebody might say like, well then how come I don't remember my past lives? And this is maybe part of the explanation. Like, yeah, when you cross over the river Lethe, you forget everything. Aletheia is a kind of a unforgetting or an uncovering, right? This is how this kind of gives you an etymological sense of what it is that not just Parmenides, but a lot of Greeks, when they use this word aletheia to talk about truth, it's a weird kind of construction of truth. It's an uncovered upness or an unforgetting of something. We're going to get like a serious version of unforgetting when we get to Plato. So we get this path of truth, and then we get this what we might call a path of seeming. Maybe that's a decent way to parse that. The word is doxa. Maybe sometimes this is used, translated as opinion or belief, mere belief, especially as opposed to truth. So there's the way that things seem, then there's the way that things are. There's the way of truth, and then there's the way of mere opinion. And the goddess says, this is the one. This is the one that you should attend to. This one is crazy. It's that path is traveled by, she calls them the two-headed mortals, who walk around with confusion in their breast. This is the path of the two-headed mortals. This is the path of truth. And I'm going to tell you both of these stories. But this is the one to pay attention to. And I'll send you back to the world of the living, where you can tell everybody what I've told you. Doesn't sound like philosophy yet. Sounds like prophecy. Sounds like divine revelation, except for the details of this path of truth that the goddess offers up. And it begins with a very simple premise. What's that premise? How does the goddess begin this account of the tale of truth? Yeah, Shai.
What is and what isn't?
Yeah. I'm going to... Yeah, and cannot be. So yeah, it's that which is. And I'll go ahead and put it here. And that which is not, and can't be. And who on earth could possibly argue with this? That which is. That which is not. It's almost like vacuously true. It's tautologically true. That which is. People will say this sometimes as if to sound wise, and maybe, I don't know, maybe there is some wisdom in this. Sometimes people will say, like, oh, it is what it is. And I'm always struck by this. I'm like, duh, of course it is what it is. Like, thanks for the help. It's not going to be what it isn't. Boys will be boys. No shit, boys will be boys. That's what it means to be a boy, is that you're like, that helps me nothing, right? That gives me absolutely nothing to say that which is, and that which is not and cannot be. Obviously, that which is, and that which is not. Do we buy this? Be careful. This is that moment where like the premise gets in the door, and if you agree to that, then like everything else gets unpacked out of it. But this is our starting point. So let's take a moment and say, like, are we up for this, Pearson?
I think it's the cannot be. It's like the contestable part.
That which is not and cannot be?
Yeah, because then you're saying like things that are not can't ever be.
Well, yeah, so you're thinking about it in time, like something that is not now can't ever come to be.
Sure.
So maybe we want to think about it that way. We'll get to that eventually. But like for now, maybe we just have to understand this as you can't say that which is not is. Is that fair enough? If I said that which is not, and it's just impossible to say that which is not is. Like the words can come out of your mouth, but it just makes no sense. It's not a coherent thought. So maybe, yeah, we can think of this in terms of like in time, something might not be at time t, and then at time t plus 1, it is. Maybe that's how you want to think about it. But for now, don't worry about that at like different times. Just think about this in terms of like at any one given time. If something is not, it is not. And if it is not, it cannot be. Because to not be is to not be. If something that was not was, then it would be instead of not being. And I don't know about you, but like there's nothing that is like more clearly not being than not being. A little bit confusing, I suppose, but just kind of like hard to talk about, I suppose. Maybe this is like, I'm going to go ahead and say like this part is like obviously true. Be careful with this one, not necessarily because like we're slipping something fancy in, but maybe there's something like weird just in saying that which is not, to even say that which is not, and cannot be. Well, it's almost like I said is. That which is not is. Well, in what way is it? Well, it is not. Think about it this way. I've got a sister. She's 3 years younger than me. She's a physical therapist. She's really awesome. She just had a baby. But I have no brothers. I've never had a brother in my entire life. I think my parents are pretty much done. Like, I'm not going to get a brother. I don't have any brothers, is my point. These non-existent brothers of mine, are they tall? Are they short? Do they have red hair? Do they have big muscles? Are they smart? Are they stupid?
No, they're not tall.
Yeah, can you say anything at all about my non-existent brothers?
Are they not?
Yeah, and this is like, it's maybe even weird to say that they don't exist. Even to say that they don't exist seems like I'm trying to predicate non-existence of them. But they don't exist. So I can't even say that they are not. To say that they are not would be almost like I'm saying that they are in a certain way. They are in a way that lacks existence. But like, no, that's not. They are not. You can't say anything at all about them. So be careful about this. This is going to get weird. This is where a lot of the weirdness kind of gets unpacked out of this. But this one seems obviously true. Joaquin.
Saying that something is not is still saying something about it.
That's maybe the point, yeah. To say that something is not is still saying something about it, which is maybe a little bit confusing.
So like purely say that something is to not like think about it at all. But you already said something about it, so it's already.
Yeah, and in fact the goddess warns us off of this too. The goddess says, like, don't even speak of that which is not. Yeah, it's unthinkable. It's not, it doesn't make any sense. Don't even let this in your mouth. This is what we're going to be talking about. But in order to like get what it is that I'm trying to say about it, we got to know that that which is. And in a manner of speaking, I suppose, which is going to be weird, that which is not and cannot be and probably should not be spoken of, and maybe hopefully like that's the last thing we say about it. Acknowledging that like that was weird. I don't know if that made any sense, but like maybe you get my drift. Yeah.
The two statements are tied together through and. Could this be the earliest form of the law of non-contradiction?
I don't know if this is the earliest form of the law of non-contradiction, but it's sure close. We're going to get something that's explicitly the law of non-contradiction from Aristotle later on, but this certainly seems to be playing off of the same idea. Yeah, this is the law of non-contradiction. Maybe as it's first introduced explicitly in philosophy, or even implicitly in philosophy. This is all, good call. This is all trading on the law of non-contradiction. And maybe in its most basic sense, because like I can say that which is red can't be not red. That which is tall can't be not tall, not at the same time and in the same respect at least, right? But we're talking about that which is. Maybe what we want to say is that which exists. What's up with my handwriting today? That which exists. And that which, I don't know, does not exist? Does not exist? This isn't your ordinary like application of the law of non-contradiction. It's the law of non-contradiction as it concerns being. So maybe another way of saying this is like being is, and non-being ain't. When we put it that way, we would say like, so there is no non-being. There can't be any non-being. If non-being was, then it would be. And it would be being. But it's non-being. So it can't be. That which is not, and cannot be. Yes?
Would death be considered a state of being?
Chauncey wonders if death is a state of being. Yeah, hold on to that. We'll get to that in just a little while. But yeah, like, If death wasn't a state of being, then it wouldn't be. And then I suppose there would be no death. If there was death, then death would have to be. One thing the goddess certainly seems to be like absolutely clear on is it cannot be. Nothing can be both. This is the path of the two-headed mortals who confuse being and non-being, and they try to hold on to both of them at the same time. They say like the same thing both is and is not. Like that's crazy talk. Yeah, well, close. Either it is or it isn't, and it isn't. Because non-being isn't. So really, it is. That's maybe all you can say here, right? Because the non-being part is not gonna. That's gonna get weird and kind of trip all over itself. Andrew.
You had a question before I did.
Yeah, Hagen.
I was just going to ask that there's no gray area. It either is.
What's in the gray area? A little bit of like being and non-being at the same time. So then non-being would be present to some degree in this thing. You're to be forgiven. This is like all two-headed mortals do this, right? Yeah.
So you're suggesting that an object containing the property of existence, and that on the latter part of the argument that such an object, there is no object.
If it doesn't exist, then like there is no object. Yeah, to take the predicates.
Or non-existence.
That's right. Yeah.
Existence will be, and it's yes or no, but there's not even an object to have the yes or no.
Yeah, and I'm importing a whole lot of like later like philosophy of language stuff onto this. Parmenides is not thinking in terms of like grammar and like there's a subject and it gets a predicate, or the object has properties and the properties have to like somehow like inhere in the object or like attach to the object somehow. But if it doesn't exist, there is no object, so like you can't attach any properties to it. But like us 2017 like super smart like philosophy of language folks, we'll look at this and say, this is what he's getting at. But as far as the goddess is concerned, she says, look, that which is, and that which is not and cannot be. Gives a little bit of an explanation, more or less what I've said so far. Are we all on board with this? Like, does it seem like, yeah, that's got to be the case? Like, how could you possibly disagree with this? Dan.
All right, so we could spend thousands of years talking about this. So
We have.
Well, what I'm about to say.
Okay.
But yes, we have also with this. But I will insert the question so that there is, in the attempt of adding some sort of doubt, what do we mean when we say to be? What do we mean when we say is to exist? That is a question that we might not necessarily for sure have the answer for when we say, oh, of course that's true.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, like Heidegger, much later on from this, is going to end up saying, like, this is the question. The Greeks, starting with Parmenides, got at it. There's this question of, like, what is the nature of being qua being? And we need to, like, find a way to open that question back up. And it's a difficult question, and it's quite possibly, like, the biggest task of metaphysics at the very least, all of philosophy maybe as well. And it's a big, nasty question. But we might also be able to say something like, I don't care what the hell being means. Like, being can mean whatever it is that you want it to mean. This is still going to work. Like, whatever being means, whatever the word is means. That which is, and that which is not, is not. Does that make sense? Is that plausible enough? Like, instead of is, here I could say is some particular way, right? Instead of just like being as some sort of predicate or existence as some sort of predicate, I could just say like, is a turkey sandwich. That which is a turkey sandwich is a turkey sandwich. And that which is not a turkey sandwich is not a turkey sandwich. Works just as well, right? Seemingly just as like impossible to disagree with. Now, that's not what the goddess is saying. She's not saying that which is a turkey sandwich is a turkey sandwich and that which is not a turkey sandwich is not a turkey sandwich. She's making it a little more complicated, opening up this question of being, but yeah, that's certainly something that's on the line. And let's not pretend that that's an easy question, that this is like a concept that like, oh, we all know, like people made fun of, was it President Clinton who, I don't even remember if he actually said this or if this was just kind of like a satirical representation of his testimony. in front of Congress, but yeah, it kind of came down to like, well, that depends on what the meaning of the word is, and it was like, oh, like, no, that's a difficult question, right? Trying to figure out what is means is not easy, and we use it all the time. It's like maybe like the one sort of verb that we take for granted. It's almost impossible to talk at all without using this word is, or this concept of is, but we do take it for granted. Yeah, Pearson.
So, like, where does possibility fit into this? Because, like, so, I don't believe unicorns exist, but, like, if some scientist got, like, a thing for unicorns and, like, he wants, like, genetically modify horses or, like, yeah, like horns right out of it or something. Like, that sounds at least possible. Maybe, like, I don't know who would spend their time doing that. But, like,
making unicorns?
Or at least, like, unicorns could have evolved. Like, it doesn't
Probably some wizard. Yeah, might make some. All right, but yeah.
Like,
is it possible that, like, even, yeah, it sounds like you're back to the same question as before, right? Which is, like, they don't exist now, but maybe at some point in the future they might come to be?
I mean, they could have existed in the past, like, if things had been...
But, like, yeah, they could have existed in the past, but currently they don't exist, so they perish. They, like, cease to be at a certain point. You'll find out. You'll find out, yeah. We're not there yet. We're just kind of like taking this, again, you're stretching it out in time, right? Of like something that is not right now but might be in the future, or something that is not right now but might have been in the past. You're stretching it out in time. Let's just kind of like freeze time for a moment. Let's just say like now, whatever's going on right now, whatever is, and whatever is not, is not. Yes?
We could reject this premise and just say that everything exists, either physically or conceptually.
Everything exists either physically or conceptually? Isn't that exactly what we're saying? Well, how would that be a rejection of the premise?
Well,
that which is. Everything exists.
Yes, but we're disagreeing with the second part.
Oh, you're saying this is saying some things don't exist?
Yeah.
No, but it's not saying some things don't exist. Because in order to say some things don't exist, we would say that there are some things that have this property of not existing. And like there are no things that like non-being isn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what.
So everything that is.
That
Yeah.
There's nothing that doesn't exist, basically.
Well, we're saying nothing does not exist. Yeah. Because if it did exist, then it would be something. But it's nothing.
Okay. So it is basically saying what I was saying.
Maybe. Joaquin.
It's just that, like, something is, I mean, nothing is something. It's nothing.
Oh, that sounded absolutely absurd. Nothing is something. It's nothing?
It's like...
What is the exact opposite of something?
There isn't.
Are you sure it's not nothing?
If every something has the exact opposite, wouldn't that make every something the same thing?
We're getting warmer.
I'm just playing games.
We're getting warmer. Let me take us to like the next level in this, because I can tell, like, Pearson is so itchy about this that like he's asked the same question twice now. So I want to kind of get to the point where I can finally answer his question about like, all right, so what's going on with time in this as well? All right, that which is, and that which is not is not. We get that something funny is going on here, but at the same time, it seems really hard to disagree with this premise. So what do we get out of it? What gets unpacked, Shai?
I just thought of this. You can't disagree with that statement because anything you say on the last part of that is not, by default, that already makes it is.
Yeah. When I speak of something, I'm trying to say that it is in some way. Even if I say it is not, I'm still kind of saying like it is not. So yeah, maybe we'll get eventually to this. I'm kind of telegraphing the move. The last time I did this, it took us a little while to come around to this, but I'll give you a hint. At the end of all this, I'm just going to cross this one out and circle this one and say like that's all we've really got, right? Is that which is. Let me move on to just one next step in this. So that which is we've got this idea being is and non-being isn't, but Pearson's questions were getting at this idea of like maybe becoming or coming to be. Tessa, is this about coming to be?
I feel like this is really simple, and I'm wanted to ask if I am oversimplifying it. Like I'm just thinking of it as like 1 = 1 and 0 = 0.
Yeah, except like even 0 equals 0 is going to be a little bit weird for this, but yeah.
That's why I wanted to ask, like, is that's how I'm
That's a
seeing it.
little bit
Is
of an,
that wrong?
that's, it's not wrong. It's a little bit of an oversimplification, but I think it might be enough to like get things going.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 is 1 and 0 is 0.
Does 1 equal 0?
And 1 can't be 0.
But for a long time, 0 was not. 0 didn't exist.
For a long time, yeah. Well, and no surprise. Why, right? Because how the hell are you going to talk about something that doesn't exist? Well, I mean, like, the noises can come out of your mouth, but, like, what are you going to say that's true and sensible about something that doesn't exist? So, yeah, 0 is a weird idea. The Greeks did not have it in their mathematics. And it's not hard to see why. So, being, non-being. Ah, but what about becoming? What about becoming? What about coming to be? And its opposite. Its opposite, and perishing. Ceasing to be. What about coming to be and perishing? Can those things be? And the goddess says, like, absolutely not. There is no coming to be or perishing. How could there be coming to be or perishing? Because this is what it means to come to be, right? Bear with me. This is just for the sake of, like, I'm telling you, this is not going to make sense because I'm going to violate the rule that we just said. But let's say over here is non-being, and over here is being. And when something comes to be, it goes from here to here, right? And when something perishes, it goes from here to here. But guess what? There is no here. So there can't be any coming to be. In order for something to come to be, it must first not be and then become. But nothing can not be. This makes no sense. There's a old Louis C.K. bit about this too. Are you guys familiar with that particular bit? He's talking about his daughter Y-chaining him, and like every time he gives an answer, she's like, why? And he says that like this just becomes so weird and abstract. Eventually, you get to this point where he says, because things that are not cannot be, and his daughters are like, why? And he says like, because nothing wouldn't be, isn't. It just like makes no sense, and it's perhaps appropriate. I don't think Louis knew that like he was getting back to the beginning of philosophy in this, but yeah, his daughter Y-chains him all the way back to the beginning of philosophy, to that which is, and that which is not, is not. Because things that are not can't be, and if there is no non-being, then there's no becoming either, because to become, to come to be, is to go from a state of not existing to a state of existing, and there is no not existing. There's no thing. There's no thing that is not existing, right? Yes, Kate.
Are we saying that things that are coming to be were already being before? So
Yeah.
So if you split the board into left and right, they were always on the left side of the board anyway.
Yeah, but that's it seems like the goddess is suggesting like that's the only way to make sense of coming to be, is to say that it would not be and then become and then be. But if we say that which is not and cannot be, then like that's just not an option. There is nothing over here. You would have to. It's like have you ever wondered this about yourself? Like where were you before you were born? You weren't, right? There was no you. Were you like waiting someplace? Waiting to like in this like waiting room of life, and you're like, here I'm like waiting. If that was the case, then you would be, but you'd just be someplace else. Yeah. Yeah, perhaps you were an egg before that, and before you were an egg, you were like a slice of pizza on your mom's plate. And before that, something else, you were wheat in a field and like milk in a cow. And then after you die, you'll become dirt, and then you'll become something else. But like that's still, like now we're still talking about, like, we're talking about you this whole time. Like, where were you before you were you? And you're like, there was no me before I was me. And we'll get to that in just a second as well. Joaquin.
Okay, so like there was a you. Like once your parents become aware that you are a thing, that's you. And I think that everything is already existing. It's just that it becomes like a quote unquote thing when you become aware.
So if you're not aware of it, then.
As soon as you become aware of it, it pops into existence. This puts an awful lot of pressure on my awareness.
That just sounds like a changing form, though.
Yeah, perhaps.
From, molecules to different.
So there was a something. There's always been a something. Like, when did it become me? Yeah, maybe that's kind of where we are, where we're thinking about, like, well, before there was you, there was an egg, and before that it was pizza, and before that it was other stuff. But, like, so there was always a something that always was. But if I start thinking about this in terms of, like, me coming into being, the goddess is going to be like, get that shit out of here. Like, you can't talk about you coming to be. P.S. If there is no you coming to be, and there's no you perishing for the same reason, right? And we're like, well, how, then what are you? And the goddess is just like, there is no you. There's no you. No things that come to be and perish, right? Because there is no coming to be and perishing. Beyond that, and maybe we're going to kind of like, maybe this is obvious at this point, if there's no coming to be and no perishing, then just like Heraclitus pointed out, there's no change. There's no becoming, no coming to be, there's no perishing, because there's no not being. Not being isn't. So there can't be this, there can't be this, and there can't be this, because every change is a perishing of one state and a coming to be of another state, and there is no perishing or coming to be. So there's no change either. There's just this. There's just that which is being, and it's one, and it's unchanging, like Xenophanes said. God is one and unchanging, a complete unity, and not separate from anything else. That's all there is. Well, but what about me? No you. That's an illusion. That's two-headed mortal shit. That's the path of seeming. That's the path of seeming that tries to believe that things both are and are not at the same time. Furthermore, there's no plurality of things. And I think we're starting to get to see why. I was just kind of introducing. There can't possibly be a plurality of things. There's no like me and you and the water bottle, and like there's not a multiplicity of different things. There's just one thing that is. There's no plurality of things, and we can think about this in terms of like all of the like various things that there are in the world. These are things that come to be and perish, and there is no coming to be and perishing. So like those things aren't things. Another way we can think about it is, well, all right, MK, so there's you and then there's me. What's between us? Air. Clever. What's between me and the air? Space?
When you add two waves, you get one wave.
That obviously settles the problem. You add two waves.
So you can make the entire universe one wavelength if you want to go all the way down.
Sure. Yeah. Bear with me here as I finish this thought process, though. Between you and me, there's air. Between me and the air, there's... Somebody said space? Is space a thing? Or are things in space? Is it like empty space? There's empty space with nothing in it? So between me and you, there's air. Between me and the air, there's like empty space with nothing. So there's nothing existing between me and the air.
Empty space does exist. It has causal interaction.
That which is not and cannot be. If it's empty space, it's either got to be something or it's going to be nothing. And if it's nothing, it can't be. And for that reason, Parmenides, or the goddess, says, like, no plurality. These are conceptually difficult things. Even if we're thinking in terms of like contemporary physics, these are still big conceptual problems to try to get past this idea of like, what the hell is space in the first place? Is it just an emptiness? Is space a thing? If it is a thing, then it exists. Did it come to be? Like, was there always space? Yeah, but like, well, it's something that like rattles around in our two-headed mortal brains. But like we think of all kinds of stuff. We think there's a sun and a moon, and we think that there's male and there's female. This is all part of the story of Doxa that the goddess gives afterward. She says, like, put no trust in this. This is cuckoo banana stuff. The only way to make sense of it is to confuse these two things. The way of truth keeps them separate and says, like, don't talk about this one. You start talking about this one, you're off on this path. You want to be on the path of truth, just stick with this. That which is. Yes?
So, okay. The reason I would say this isn't true is that what I was saying earlier, the things either existing physically or conceptually. So when you say that a state perishes in the case of any change and once a new state arises, it's not really true. They both still exist, just one no longer exists physically and the other does exist physically. But they both still exist, just in different forms.
One just exists conceptually now.
Yes.
But it doesn't exist physically.
Yes.
Did you just like multiply the problem instead of saying like that which is, instead of making being like simple, you've made being complex?
It exists in a different way.
That there are two different kinds of being.
Yes.
And in one of those kinds of beings, you can say like it doesn't exist physically.
It exists
But it still exists.
It still exists, yeah.
It just exists
In a different way.
in a different way.
What if there's no thinker around to think it?
There's no thinker to think it. And thinkers, like, don't thinkers come to be and perish?
You could just say could be thought instead of has.
Could be thought. That which can be thought. This is getting into like Alexius Minon territory, where like, yeah, anything that could be thought exists someplace in like, I don't know, some like imaginary zoo, where like the unicorns and like all of the Jabberwockies and all of the things that you can think about, but like don't exist physically. They have to exist somehow. Logic demands it. So they have to, I don't know about you guys, that certainly seems to be a way of disagreeing with this and maybe kind of like solving the riddle, but it also seems just as weird as the alternative that the goddess has on offer, which is to say anything that can be thought of does exist.
Wait, what?
Perhaps
what did
not
you say?
physically, but exists in some other way.
What did you say was the alternative?
The to that,
Well, how did you paraphrase what he said?
that
Possibly the alternative?
that everything that, oh, you're gonna catch me like breaking the rule.
No.
Um,
I'm wondering.
That everything
In the
that can be
imagination
thought
land?
of, yeah, everything that could be possibly thought of does exist. Perhaps not physically, but in some other way. And we're still in this kind of like weird territory of saying there is nothing that doesn't exist. Because if there was something that didn't exist, then there would be something that's nothing, and like, that makes no sense. And there can't be a nothing. This is going to be important on Tuesday, too, what I was saying to MK about like the empty space, the nothingness, that like the somethings occupy those places and move through that nothingness. Like, that's crazy talk, too. Because then there would have to be something which is not that is, and like, doesn't work that way. Josh, then Kate, then Sean, then Joaquin, and then I'm gonna try to transition on. Yeah. I did say Josh first. Sorry.
What does that statement mean for things that we don't know?
For things that we don't know, I'm gonna play this like the goddess. Who is this we?
I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's kind of weird. It's kind of I gave up listening in like maybe like 30 minutes ago.
Really? No, but you raised your hand and you asked a question. That's good. I like that. It is confusing. I won't lie, and I'm making it a little bit extra confusing just for fun.
I know.
But I think maybe this is also the point: is that to try to think this side of the dilemma is just like, it makes no sense. This is maybe the goddess's point, is that like, this shit makes no sense at all. And to like, try to abide by the idea that like, we don't say things that don't make any sense. None of these other things are going to make sense either. Like, coming to be, like, can't possibly make sense. And I get that this is going to seem strange, because this is how the world seems. The world seems to be full of a plurality of things that come to be and perish, and there are like things that are, but then there are also things which are not, like unicorns. But the goddess says, like, that's just crazy talk. Here's the simplest version of this. That which is. It is one, it is unified, it is unchanging. There is no plurality of things. If this sounds a little bit Eastern, you wouldn't be the first person to remark on that similarity, that it's just kind of this recognition that there's no me, there's no you, there's no separation of all the things. There's just one big thing that is. And it's, I don't know, it's just like humming, going, like, that's it. And if you recognize that, that's the truth. All of the like carving up being into like little bits and pieces that are separate from one another that come to be and perish and all of those things. And then there are some things that like, oh, they aren't anymore, or they're not yet, or anything like that. Like, that's the two-headed mortals breaking up the unity of being into little pieces. And that's the mistake. That's where we get confused. You might be thinking, like, that's not where I got confused. I was doing just fine. This is where I got confused. Parmenides is where I got confused. Okay.
So I get that everything is, and everything that can be thought of is, and everything is. But how does this help anything?
Oh, what do you mean, help?
Like, the other ones seem to have help us understand the universe, and I just...
This doesn't help us understand the universe.
It does, but I just...
It doesn't separate us from the universe. There is no us and the universe and like, well, I try to understand the universe. This is the only way as far as the goddess is concerned, and I think she's got a point here, and I think a lot of like Zen Buddhists would be like, goddess has a point here. That like you want to understand the universe, you need to understand it as something that like you are a part's maybe not even the right word, because like parts are all separate from one another. Like, it's a unified whole. And it includes me. And in order to recognize that, I need to like let go of self. I need to kind of like empty myself of like all of those things. And just kind of, I don't know, somehow like get in tune with like being. Being. That's all you can say. Being. Being is the truth. Yeah, maybe that's why they didn't eat beans. Nah, that's only in English that they sound the same. Sean, you had something.
The last comment that you made reminded me of this song. I think this piece of writing, maybe it's written by Thoreau, called Oversoul. Have you read that?
I haven't, but it seems a familiar enough idea, yeah, that there's some... And if we think about this in terms of like Xenophanes is like one unified, unchanging God, all we need to do is kind of like shift that over from like being something that's separate from us and everything else to like, that's just all that there is. There's just God. You want to call it God? Sure. You want to call it being? Call it being.
The other thing I was going to say, doesn't this kind of bring us back to the Monism way of thinking? When you look at what Anaximander said and the guy after him,
Anaximenes? Yeah.
Because he kind of said, played with this idea of condensation or rarefaction.
Rarefaction, yeah.
Yeah, rarefaction.
Yeah, but even then, that would suggest that there's change, right? It seems like all of the Milesians thought that there was change.
What if you use the apeiron as that subject that is...
That there's just the indefinite?
Yeah.
But things come out of the apeiron and go back into the apeiron?
Not necessarily going back. So, what if the apeiron is kind of like a being?
I mean, there's certainly a way... you can imagine a conversation between Anaximander and Parmenides where maybe they come to some sort of agreement. But it seems like Anaximander, all on his own, does not get here. Because he thinks that there is change. He thinks that there's coming to being and there's perishing. Coming to be is like that which comes out of the apeiron and takes some sort of definite shape or form or becomes a definite thing, and to perish is to go back into the indefinite, infinite, like unbounded. And Parmenides is just saying, like, no, that's not a thing. We got to talk about Zeno. We got to talk about Parmenides' student Zeno. We only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to cut this off. I don't know. But I will say this, that thinking is not something that like completely escapes notice in this poem. At one point, the goddess says, "For it is the same for thinking as it is for being," which is a hugely important line. Parmenides scholars go ape poo-poo over that line. And one of the ways that we can think about this is that Eleatic Monism is probably the first really clear articulation of a sort of position that we now call rationalism. And all I mean by rationalism here is that, like, look, if given an option of, like, trying to, like, my guess is you've probably experienced something like this where, like, things seem a certain way, to, I don't know, like to your senses, for example, to like empirical senses. Things seem a certain way, but then when you think about it carefully, like it makes no rational sense that like it could possibly be that way that it seems. If there's a conflict between the way that things seem to the senses and the way that they make sense according to rational thought, guess which of those two the rationalist is going to put their trust in? Go ahead, guess. The rational thought. There you go. Yeah, so rationalism, we can think of this as specifically opposed to empiricism. And this is we're gonna get a lot of mileage out of this in this class as well. This idea that, like, look, the senses will tell you one thing, rational thought will tell you something very different. Rationalists will say, like, well, obviously you go with rational thought. Rational thought is going to tell you how things actually are, as the goddess says, for it is the same for thinking as it is for being. The way that things make sense, according to the logos, that's the way that they must be. And if they seem different, oh, so much the worse for seeming. Zeno, Parmenides' student, who, and we'll see in the Platonic dialogue, Parmenides is kind of posed by Plato as like pretty much just saying the same thing that Parmenides is. Of course he's saying the same thing that Parmenides is. There can't be a plurality of things to say, according to Parmenides. And is giving like various different arguments, he's giving arguments that attempt to kind of prove the basic Eleatic thesis, that there can't be any change, there can't be any plurality, stuff like that. One of the things that we see from Zeno, and he gives us like these kind of like nifty little paradoxes. They're not like these little riddles like Heraclitus gives us, because they're intended to not, like the paradoxes are not intended to, well, how do I want to say this? The paradoxes are intended to be reductio ad absurdum arguments. What I mean by a reductio ad absurdum argument is like we make an assumption. We say like maybe this is true, and then we show that that assumption leads me to a naked contradiction, or it leads me to some sort of paradox. And if it leads me to some sort of paradox, if it leads to a contradiction, then the thing that I assumed was true can't possibly be true. And that's a way of arguing, right? Like, let's assume X. X leads to a contradiction. Okay, then we've proved that X can't possibly be the case. And Zeno is working in that sort of register in an attempt to prove the spirit of the Eleatic program here, that all is one and there's no plurality and there's no change or anything like that. One of the things that he mentions is this paradox of space and place. Did you guys catch that one in the reading? I didn't ask a reading question about it, but I think it goes something like this. Everything that exists in a certain place. But what about place itself? What about space? Is space in space? Does space have a place in space? Yeah, so like it can't be the case that like everything has a place. Or it can't be the case that like space or place is even really a thing. There can't be like a plurality of different places. Here's another one that Zeno dusts off for us. Maybe you've heard about this one before. This is the Achilles and the tortoise paradox. This is one of Zeno's many paradoxes of motion. So here's Achilles. He's got abs and muscles because he's Achilles. Achilles, he's got one of those little helmets with all the like feathers and shit on top. All right, so there's Achilles, and Achilles is like super fast. Say what you will about Achilles and his ability to control his rage, but he's like way strong and way fast. And Achilles is going to race a tortoise, and the tortoise is not fast at all. And maybe out of a sense of fair play, but if you know anything about Achilles, I don't know if that, maybe out of a sense of like showing up the tortoise and showing like just how much faster he is than the tortoise, Achilles says, all right, I'll race you, tortoise, but I'm going to give you a big head start. Achilles gives the tortoise a big head start just to show how much faster he is than the tortoise. And he's sitting around, he's like, hey, how you doing? I'm racing the tortoise. And then like he looks at his watch, he's like, all right, maybe it's time to go. And starts running. And he starts running to catch up to the tortoise, and he's fast, so he does. He catches up to the tortoise. He's not so fast that he can instantaneously go from here to here. It takes him some amount of time, right? He's like really, really fast, but it's always going to take some amount of time for him to traverse this distance. And when he does traverse that distance, because it's taken some amount of time, well, our old friend the tortoise, who is slow, but is not standing absolutely still, has moved forward a little bit. I'll let him move forward a little more so that we can see it a little more clearly. So Achilles catches up to where, he doesn't actually catch up to the tortoise, he catches up to where the tortoise was. And in that time, the tortoise has moved forward. No problem, says Achilles. I'll catch up now. So he goes from where the tortoise was to now where the tortoise is. And he does it super fast because he's Achilles. But he doesn't do it instantaneously, so it takes a certain non-zero amount of time. And in that time, the tortoise has moved again. No problem, says Achilles. I'll just catch up now. And that takes him a certain amount of time. And in that time, the tortoise has moved. No problem, I'll catch up now. And then the tortoise moves. And then, no problem, I'll catch up right now. And then the tortoise moves. Is he ever going to catch up?
It seems like this only makes sense to Zeno's first paragraph.
Which one is that?
Before you go half of this, you have to go.
So yeah, let's see this in a slightly different way. So instead of like Achilles trying to catch up to the tortoise, let's say like I'm going to walk from here to the water bottle. But in order for me to walk from here to the water bottle, first I have to make it to the halfway point. So I do that first. And now I'm going to make it the rest of the distance to the water bottle. Before I make it the rest of the distance, I have to make it to this new half point. All right. Now I got to make it the rest of the way. And first I got to go to the halfway point. And then the halfway point to that. And then the halfway point to that. And there's always going to be another halfway point. So there's like an infinite number of trips for me to make in order to get from there to the water bottle. And nobody can make perform an infinite task in a finite amount of time. So like I can't make it to the water bottle. If you think that's weird, I can't even really get started because before I get to the halfway point to the water bottle, I got to get to the halfway point to that halfway point. Before I get to there, I got to get to the halfway point of that. Before I get to there, I got to get to the halfway point of that. It's not even that I can't finish the trip. I can't start the trip.
What if you had infinite time?
If I had infinite time,
so the amount of time it would take from get to there, first you'd have to.
If I had infinite time, when would I complete the task? At the end of infinite time?
So how long it would take you to do it? First, you'd have to have the first half of that time, and the first half of that, and then the first half. I'm doing the same thing, so you have X time for every X.
Now, anybody who's like done any significant like higher level mathematical analysis says like there's this thing that gets invented called the limit concept. It's not going to be around for a long, long time. Some folks who are like really sharp on physics might say all of this assumes that like space is continuous and that you can always divide. But like I'm not sure if space is continuous. There might be this thing called the Planck length, which says that like space is discrete, that it's kind of granular, that like you kind of like hop along in chunks. And maybe time works the same way too. But none of that stuff is going to be even close to available to anybody for thousands of years. Zeno is dropping this, and it is a puzzle. Even if you're sitting there thinking to yourself like, mathematicians and physicists have figured this out by now. Have you figured it out? Do you understand like why it is that you could possibly walk across a room? Because Zeno's giving you like a pretty straightforward argument that appeals to rationality that says like this should be impossible. And like any good rationalist, Zeno says like, look, according to the Logos, according to like what makes rational sense, Achilles cannot possibly catch up to the tortoise. And it was like, but I've seen Achilles catch up to the tortoise, or I've seen people overtake other people in races. And Zeno, like Parmenides, like the goddess, is going to say, I get that it seems that way, but so much the worse for seeming. That stuff isn't like motion is an illusion. Plurality, it's an illusion. change. It's an illusion. None of it makes any sense. There's only one thing, and it's unchanging.
This is the first thought.
That's Eleatic Monism. So, sorry, Dan?
This is the first thought experiment we've seen from these guys, I think.
This is maybe the first thought experiment. Yeah, we get a whole series of them from Zeno. Yeah, that's a good catch. Yeah, we get the beginnings of thought experiments as a philosophical methodology. Yeah, for sure. Pearson.
I think, I don't really know everything about philosophy and math, but like, I feel like there's a huge difference between like, there's a infinity big and there's infinity small. Like,
Yeah.
the infinity we're talking about here is contained within a finite length.
Yeah. Aristotle's going to make this distinction. He's going to talk about the infinite and the infinitesimal, right? Big infinities and small infinities.
So, like, in another example, I would agree that Achilles could never cross an infinite length if it was like, all right, he has to travel a mile, and then travel 2 miles, and then travel 3 miles, and then 4,
and then 4, and then 5.
Of course you would never finish that. It would just keep getting bigger and bigger. This is different because it's getting smaller and smaller.
So this might be like how we do this with the limit concept, right?
Yeah,
we say that like,
Yeah,
we say something like the distance. Yeah, sure. It seems as if like Achilles will never actually catch up to the tortoise, but notice that the distance that he still needs to cover is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and as this trends to infinity, the distance is trending to 0, right? It's trending to the infinitesimal. So at a certain point, like, as just when Zeno says, like, this becomes an infinite task and you can't do it, we'll say, like, when it becomes an infinite task, he's there. He's actually caught up to the tortoise. Now, maybe that gets you caught up to the tortoise. I don't know if that gets you past the tortoise, though.
But it's still infinitely small. You're talking about.
Maybe. Yeah, we might say something like, yeah, he's got an infinitesimal distance to cover, and so it's going to take him an infinitesimal amount of time to cover it. And so, again, he's like pretty much there. Yeah, this is how this gets solved it depends, like, we want to talk, maybe this is in the 18th century with L'Hopital, maybe this is in the 19th century with maybe this is the 17th century with L'Hopital, 18th century with the development of the calculus, maybe not till the 19th century when mathematicians start to say, like, that concept works, but I don't know if we've made any sense of it just yet. We need to invent a new branch of mathematics called analysis. If you're interested in this stuff, there's a really clever book by David Foster Wallace called, Everything and More, A Compact History of Infinity, where he breaks this stuff down and he does it in like a not very technical way. One of my favorite authors and essayists. You can check that out. But yeah, this is a problem. It's maybe a soluble problem, but it's a problem. Parmenides' problem is a problem too. And what we've introduced here is a new branch, kind of like a new flavor of monism, and this thing called rationalism. And it's going to set up like one pole of a dilemma that the rest of our ancient philosophers are going to be wrestling with. I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Enjoy writing your first reflection draft if you haven't done it already. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the readings. I'll see you then.